I was actually quite surprised recently when I discovered just how really bizarre the process of metamorphosis is. For a caterpillar as it enters a cocoon and slowly turns into a butterfly or a moth. I think in my mind's eye, I always pictured something like, the transformation a person undergoes when they're becoming a werewolf, like in films like, like American Werewolf in London. You imagine all the limbs stretching out and the face changing shape, and, kind of like Bruce Banner turning into the Hulk, but over a process rather than in a moment. And I think that's what I always imagined, that there's this caterpillar inside this cocoon, just twisting and stretching, and its eyes are changing shape, and its wings are coming out, and it's kind of progressing. Like if you were to do a cross-section of that cocoon, you'd see like a caterpillar, then something that's slightly less caterpillar-like, and less caterpillar, slightly halfway between a butterfly and a caterpillar now, and then more like a butterfly, and kind of like you saw almost like a process of evolution, but in a micro scale. But that's not at all what happens. I was shocked to find out the reality is bizarre. Actually a lot more incredible, a lot more radical than I actually thought. In essence, inside that shell, the caterpillar is unmade. I mean, dissolves completely. Its body is broken down completely by enzymes until it basically becomes a soup. If you were to open the chrysalis at this stage, you wouldn't find a caterpillar, you wouldn't find a butterfly, you wouldn't find some kind of halfway in between creature. You would find nothing recognizable, just a goo, basically. And yet, within that liquid, within that goo, hidden from sight, are these tiny clusters of special cells called imaginal discs. And these were present in the caterpillar all along, right from the beginning. They were kind of silent, dormant, unseen. And in these cells, these little seeds of its future self, it's these cells that guide the reconstruction of this animal, forming something completely new. Now that's already very strange. And when we think of it that way, we think, okay, so we have a caterpillar, and then essentially the caterpillar is destroyed, and then there's something completely new. But this is where it gets really miraculous. So scientific studies have actually confirmed that butterflies and moths actually retain memories from their caterpillar days. Now just imagine that for a second. Every part of the caterpillar is melted down to a cellular level. And despite being totally destroyed, totally torn apart, remade completely anew, something within that caterpillar, now butterfly or moth, remembers. Now, in my experience, natural processes like this, natural miracles, they have a lot to teach us about the nature of our life, and in particular, with examples like this, the nature of suffering. It's almost as if God, writes these teachings into the very fabric of creation itself, just for us to discern, to find, the world he's made is not just beautiful, it's instructive. The caterpillar doesn't know what it's becoming, yet it submits to this process. And I have to ask myself, isn't this something that we experience? Something like this in the spiritual life? We come into this world like caterpillars, just crawling through life, clinging to comfort, just feeding our gut and, just resisting change, just going along, consuming. But the gospel doesn't tell us to crawl, it tells us to be transformed. And this is what we mean by repent. Repent is to turn around. That's what repent means, is to turn around. The idea is that if you're on a path away from God, if you're on a path away from that transformation to make you who you truly are supposed to be in God, it's that call to turn back to God. And transformation, that turning away from everything we know, everything that gives us comfort, everything we feed on, that's not painless. Christ doesn't say to us, come, be slightly improved. I can make your life slightly better. No, he says, take up your cross and follow me. He tells us that unless a grain of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. The world fears suffering because it sees only destruction. But we, as Christians, as Catholics, we're not of the world in this way. We know that suffering isn't the end. It's the beginning. The caterpillar doesn't understand the chrysalis, but it submits to the process. So too we're called to submit to the hands of the divine artist, even when he breaks us down, even when we're left in darkness, when we're reduced to the absolute primordial elements, when we're left with nothing. Even when all we knew, everything we knew that we were, everything we felt attached to, everything we dreamt of being is stripped away, and we're faced with that rawness of reality. And what happens then, when the time of suffering is complete? The butterfly emerges. But even then, it's not ready. Okay? A newly formed butterfly, its wings are crumpled, they're fragile, it struggles to break free. And yet the struggle is necessary. Okay, as anyone naturalist would tell you, if you actually try to help this little butterfly out of its cocoon, it's trying to peel the cocoon apart, if you were to cut the cocoon, spare it the hardship, spare it the struggle of having to get out of that cocoon, you'd actually cripple it. That the very fight to emerge is actually what strengthens this creature's wings. It actually prepares it for flight. It needs to push through that cocoon in order for its wings to be ready to fly. If you aid it, if you spare it that momentary struggle, it will never fly. And the same, in a sense, goes with us. The cross that we're called to bear, it's not an obstacle to transformation. It's the means of it. Our trials, our sufferings, our purifications, these are the very things by which God prepares us to enter into his glory. For our light and momentary afflictions are achieving for us an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison. That's what St. Paul says in his second letter to the Corinthians. And so I say to you, don't fear the chrysalis. Don't resist the breaking. Don't tremble when God leads you into a place of suffering. Because it's not destruction. It's transformation. You weren't made to crawl forever. You were made to fly.